Okay, editing. More specifically, drum editing. No one likes to talk about it, but we're all doing it every day. So I'm going to go through how I do this and different methods for doing this and some of the stuff that I do day to day. So I've got a song arrangement here, times 3. Okay, so this is the song, this is the final arrangement. And I've got a couple of duplicate arrangements that we may talk about in a bit. So just to gloss over what they are. The main arrangement is this, and the only thing that's changing is the tempo basically. So here is the tempo map for this arrangement. Just got a couple of shifts in there to help the feel and the groove. This arrangement is the same tempo map but slowed down 3 BPM. We may cover it in this video, but or maybe I'll come back because I don't believe we actually use this for drums, but we may come back to it. And then up here is the original tempo map, which was a static tempo map at 127, which we then decided after a few takes we needed to move things around a little bit. So there's a couple of ways to edit audio. You've essentially got cutting and moving notes, which is kind of a given and generally the least offensive way to do things, and for a lot of reasons the best way to do things. So that would be essentially this. So we'll find the transient of a drum point. Before I go any further, I would actually just point out that drums are a single instrument. Even though there are multiple mics, there's a lot of channels here for the drum set. They are to be grouped together and they must be moved as a single piece unless there's dire circumstances as to why that can't be a thing, for a whole variety of reasons that I can go into another time. But let's just assume that it's one instrument across multiple tracks. We're doing it as a single piece. So yeah, we can do slip editing, which is essentially cutting and moving. So I'm going to highlight this area from the transient, I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to move to the grid. Okay, so just to go back and go through it one more time to make sure you're with me, I'm tabbing to transient. So I'm clicking here, I'm hitting tab, it meets the transient, and I'm highlighting the area that I want to move. I'm breaking it with B, and I'm moving it to the grid. I'm in slip mode up here, and my grid mode is grid, not relative. So when I'm in slip mode, I can move it freely if I wish. But in this case, I'm snapping it to the grid, so I'm holding command, click, move, it hits the grid. Another way of doing that is to highlight the region that you want to move, command, and 0. 0 on the main numbers on the top of your keyboard, not the numpad. Okay, and yeah, so we could be going through our song like this each time around, finding the transient. Find the transient. In this case, I'm actually going to cut the excess because it's unnecessary. We're not going to need this bit for the moment. I'm using A to do that. I'm cutting before the marker. Okay, cut, move, so on and so forth. This is generally, again, the least offensive way to do this. It will protect phase across the drum mics, and also it protects the performance as well. So for example, say we were to just move our snare drum, and I've had a few jobs come in where someone's done this. It creates hell, because if you see, we can move the snare drum here, but a snare bottom is now going to be out of time with the snare top here. It's going to be out of time with the overheads. It just sounds horrific. So when you're doing large moves, it will just sound bad. It will sound out of time and messy. When you're doing small moves, it's going to start messing with the phase. When you're in small increments, it's going to start changing things. So some hits will sound heavy, some will sound light. And yeah, we want to try and avoid this. So we're mostly going to work around with variations on this theme, cutting notes and moving them again. Okay. So let me just undo all that for a sec. So the other method would be elastic audio. So elastic audio is set up here. I've already got it set on this track. I probably should have pre-prepared that, but I haven't. But you've got this little guy here. So we click that, and inside there we've got this menu that comes up. Okay, I tend to use polyphonic on a daily basis. Maybe we'll go into the modes in a bit. Maybe we won't need to, but we'll see how we go. And with this mode, we change our view to warp, and you can also cycle these by using Control and Command and the arrow keys. You can go left and right to find it. What's really handy is from the waveform view, the first click to your left, so it's Control, Command, left, will take you straight to the warp view. And from here, we can do this by hand, by double clicking or is it single clicking? It might be single clicking. Single clicking. The hit we want to move. So in this case, the snare has come first, and we can snap that to the grid. I tend to avoid elastic audio with drums and multi-mic sources because it's not phase accurate. It will do strange things to the sound. So in terms of performance, actually, it is the most natural way, in my opinion. I think it sounds far more musical to do it this way. But it can cause a whole variety of problems when you get to mixing. So yeah, I try to cut and move as much as I can, as much as feasibly possible. So we're gonna assume that we're doing that. That's the last bit we're gonna do on elastic audio for this. Okay, we're gonna assume we're doing cutting and moving. So as I said, we to cut and move or slip edit, we're constantly moving stuff to the grid, and that's great. That's accurate, but it is very time consuming. So we can either be cutting stuff moving along, or we can slip within the region as well. Okay. That's control and the plus and minus on the numpad. This is really handy when you're fine tuning things, but that's a little bit later down the line. So that's the best way to do drums, but again, time consuming. So Avid made this lovely thing called Beat Detective. The shortcut for that was Command and 8, or you can go into the event drop down, Beat Detective. So this will basically do all the work for us. Okay, so just to go through one more time, I know I've done it a couple of times, just to go through the manual process in detail. We'd be looking for a transient, we'd be cutting it, moving it to the grid, and then so on and so forth throughout our arrangement. Now, when we do this, what you're going to find is typically some hits going to be late, some hits going to be early. Now, when a hit is late, you know what? I'm probably not going to be able to find one that does this now. that one might just do it. Let's chop this up. Put this on the grid. Yeah, I'm not going to find one that hits early, but basically, if this hit was substantially late, we're moving it earlier. There's kind of no harm, no foul. It's really simple. We just move it back up over the pre-existing audio, no problems. Now, a lot of the time, hits are going to be played early, so we push them back. So, for example, here, we've pushed this hit back onto the grid, and we're left with this hole. So, the way we deal with that is by dragging from the late hit to the previous hit, okay? And that will close this gap up. So, go back. This is with the gap. Play a little bit more of it there. Obviously, we can't leave this gap in it, so we have to fill this in. Okay, so we go in, we drag across. Like so. Sorry, my computer's been very slow with the screen capture running. We drag back. Oh my god. This is why we're going to go through Beat Detective. This is quite a laborious process to do it like this. We'll drag it back, and then that fills the hole. Okay. Great. Okay, so it masks the edit. It's now invisible. We'd go one step further than that. We'd have to add in some crossfades. So I'm going to hit Command F. Brings up our crossfade dialog. We hit OK. And it creates a crossfade. And now this should be relatively invisible. Okay, so just to go through the crossfade settings for that as well, because this is important. I believe as standard, Pro Tools will treat a crossfade as centered. And what that means is it will place the fade over the join, like the crossfade center will be where the files join up, like so. So this is where the line was, this is where the fade is. The problem with that is if your fade is quite close to your hits, like so, it's going to soften the transient off. See, the crossfade is now over the transient. It needs to be before if we want to make this transparent. Okay, so go back to our fade window. Just make sure it's pre-slice, and now it's coming up in the right place. So this takes us quite a while to get to that point. Needless to say, whilst this is effective and it works, it's really time consuming. So yeah, Beat Detective to the rescue, as they say. So what we're going to do is we're going to select a small area, say 8-bar section or a 4-bar section. So we're going to select from the start of, let's say a whole section. It's all similar timing here to the end of that section. Okay, let's zoom out so we can see the whole thing. So there's a few things that you have to do with Beat Detective in order for it to do what we want. Like it's not going to do this stuff automatically. You have to tell it exactly what you want, otherwise weird things will start to happen. So even though we've selected that area, Beat Detective doesn't really know what it's looking at yet. Okay, so once we've got the window open, we want to go to clip separation, and we want to hit capture selection, and hopefully you saw this change up here. So this is now looking at our selection. Okay, once we've done this, we're going to hit analyze, and as you can see, a whole load of edit points have come up. So this should be following kick, snare and hat. We'll check. Yeah, brilliant. Just going to change my buffer. I think I've got my buffer low, which is not helping things. I do. That's going to cause all manner of hell. Okay, so Beat Detective knows what it's looking for. That's a good start. We are going to check what it's looking for though, because it will make mistakes. Okay, so every time you see a purple line, that's where it's going to cut. So we're looking at the kick. That's good. We're going to scroll across to the next one. We've got a snare hit. Fantastic. What we can also do is hit scroll next, scroll previous, and it will take you to all of these markers. So here, I'm going to assume there's a hi-hat. Yep, there's a hi-hat hit in there. And then scrolling on. Yeah, this is all fantastic. This is what we want. Okay, here, this is a matter of taste thing, but for me, when we're doing four to the floor grooves, where or any groove where two drums hit at once, I tend to prioritize the higher pitched element, or at least I give the kick the least priority in these scenarios. I want the snare to be what we're quantizing to. For me, that sets the pace of the song, and that's far more important. Also, it's much easier to move a kick separately if we need to. So in this case, it doesn't know what it's looking for. It's cutting somewhere between the snare and the kick hit. So we're just going to drag this over the snare hit before we go any further. We're going to keep checking through to make sure there's nothing strange in there. It looks good. That's not quite right. So we're going to pull that back a bit. Again, there it's looking. So in this case, yeah, no, we will go with the snare on that. Yeah, same again. Just dragging it back into position for where it wants to be. So yeah, quite a few misfires. Probably only to the amount of room mics I've got going on. Yeah, all good. A little bit late there. Yeah, cool. So on and so forth. We're going to pretend that I've done all this now, but yeah, we'd basically go through, check the whole section. So from there, we're going to hit separate. And then we're going to go to clip conform, this is the quantizing part. So once we've hit separate, we've created our cuts. That's brilliant. We've got all these slices to work with, saves us going and doing it ourselves. Conform is going to conform to whatever this value is. Okay, so this is set to eighth notes. For this, eighth notes makes perfect sense. It's an eighth note groove. Okay, and once we hit conform, it's going to snap to the grid. There we go. Okay, so undoing it, that's where we were. Redoing it, this is where we've gone. And again, this is a good performance, so we didn't need to go crazy with this, but for the example of this, we are. Once it's conformed to the grid, that's brilliant, but we've got the gaps in the audio. So rather than going through and manually filling one each by one, we've got edit smoothing. We've got two options here. We've got fill gaps with crossfades. We're just going to do fill gaps. Okay. The reason for that is Beat Detective doesn't like, or it will not work with crossfades. They have to be gone in order to operate. So whilst we're in the process of timing this stuff together, we don't want any crossfades. We're going to do them afterwards, which also allows us the freedom to tune them as we like. So I'm going to hit smooth. As you can see, it's filled up all the gaps from start to finish of this section. Okay, so we have a listen through. And that's great. Timing wise, it's done the job. It's relatively transparent. If you've got a keen ear, you can hear some popping and clicking in between. That's just to do with the edit points not being faded at the moment, not containing fades. So we're going to open a fade dialog. Again, checking pre-slice. I use 5 millisecond fades. That's more than enough. I never have an issue there. You've got to be careful with your fade lengths. If you start going further from there, you can get some strange interaction between the edits. So I try to keep my crossfades as small as possible. So I'm going to hit OK. And there we are, done. The whole thing's crossfaded. There we are, done. You may want to fine tune things. It's worth having a good check over this stuff to make sure nothing strange has happened. Here, looks like we've got a hi-hat hit opening a little bit early, so I'm just going to come and drag this back. But for the most part, I think that's pretty good to go, really. Let's have one more check through. Yeah, I'm good with that. So once you've done your whole song like this, we want to consolidate this edit. So I'm going to select the whole thing and hit Alt, Shift, 3. And now we're thinking about one audio file rather than millions of cuts. And really, that's it. In some situations, I may record something at a slower tempo than the final tempo. Now, sometimes that will be because a decision has been made later down the line that we want to do it at a faster tempo, or occasionally I do this to make the editing process smoother with less artifacts. So if we go to the end here, apparently I already did some stuff here. Okay. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to go to the previous playlist and just get the previous edit. Place it back over there. Great. Okay, so this is at a slower tempo. It's at 126. The section we were just listening to was at 129. So if I want to get this into the fast tempo, there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can copy this whole section to the faster tempo. And as you can see, it's just ever so slightly dragging behind the beat all the way through. Now, we're going to struggle to beat detective this because it's drifting further and further away from the grid. Beat detective is going to start putting it into the wrong places, so we can't necessarily do that at this tempo. We could go through it and do it by hand, which is actually pretty quick to do when you're working like this. We're going to cut. We're going to select the next audio file, which is Control Tab, and then quantize. And we can just keep going through this one block at a time. And because it's pretty much a given that it's going to be a bit late and we're going to be pushing it back on time, this is quite a smooth process to do. There's no crossfading to do because there's no gaps, because the note was late. We're pushing the files together. There's no issue there for the most part. That it may arise as we go through, but for the time being, there's no issue with that. Now we could do that again. As I said before, it's quite time consuming to do so. So there's another way we can do this. Okay, so I'm going to undo all this and go back to the end of the project. So we can use, even though I said you can't use Beat Detective for this, there is a way you can use Beat Detective to help. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the first half of the process. Okay, so I'm going to start, just throw that there, so the downbeat is absolutely on the 1. We're going to select the section we're working on. Actually, you know what? We were working on this section. Let's actually use the right section. There we go. Okay, so that's now on the grid. Okay, so we're going to go through the same process for the most part. Just as an aside, actually, when you're running this process, try to make sure you're doing whole bars, that you're selecting from bar 1 to bar 1. I'm not too sure why, but Beat Detective doesn't really like doing small divisions of bars. It can handle whole beats, but it can't really handle much less than that. So it's best to try and do this in whole blocks of 4, 8 bars, whatever, whole bar sections. So, okay, so back on track. We're going to do the first half of the Beat Detective process, okay? So we've selected our section. Capture selection. Remember, we need to tell Beat Detective we're working on this section. Analyze. Is showing our points here, and we're going to hit separate, so all the same still. We're going to do clip conform. We're not going to do edit smoothing. Okay, now what we're going to do at this point, we're going to change our tracks from sample mode to tick mode. So in sample mode, your tracks will be relative to time. In tick mode, they'll be relative to tempo. So what that means is when you change its position on the timeline or change the tempo, in sample mode, it will stay relative to its original performance or original placement. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's try to put a tempo change in here. So we're at 126 at the moment. We're going to go up to 129. Now the grid is moving, but the audio is staying the same. Okay, can you see that? I'll do it one more time. Forwards. The grid moves, but the audio doesn't. Okay. Now we're going to change this to ticks. Now we're going to put the tempo change in. Okay, so we go up a few BPM, and everything moves together. Okay, so now we're actually changing the timing of the performance. Okay, so what we're going to do here, because we've got a pre-existing arrangement, we're in ticks mode. We're going to copy. We go back to our arrangement at 129, which was actually this. I keep going to the wrong place. And then we're going to paste, and this is pasted to our new tempo, albeit with things to fix up still. So we've done the first half of the Beat Detective process. Now we're going to do the last couple of steps, which is to fill the gaps, which it didn't do. There we go. And then finally crossfade. And that's it. Just rinse and repeat for the entirety of your song. That's Editing Drums 101. I've undoubtedly missed something out, so just get in touch if you need me to go over anything in more detail. I'm sure I'll redo this video in the future, but I just wanted to get that out there for now, really. But yeah, great. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.